Hey everybody, I'm Maureen. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you how to sew a quilted skirt. So I am cheating here a little bit. This is a thrift flip from quilted pillowcases that I bought a few months ago. And I'm also sharing with you a free pattern. So I am sharing that link as well. So what you're going to need for this sew along is either some quilted fabric with some sort of batting or something like that that maybe you already have in your stash, or you could do like me and get quilted pillowcases and do it that way. And you're going to need the free pattern that I'm linking below. It is the pine dress, but we're actually just going to be using the skirt portion, and I'm actually going to show you how to make a facing for that in this tutorial. So do not worry, you know I got you. Let's get into this tutorial. So make sure you cut out all your pieces and then mark your darts as per usual. Even though this is thicker fabric, we are still going to move forward with darts since they help with the shaping of this pattern. So I always use a soluble marker to make my dart legs, and then I do a stitch all the way down both dart legs on the garment, and then I always just do a little bit of extra stitches at the very end, and that is kind of like my knotting or tie off method. Once you have completed your darts on all pattern pieces, go ahead and serge your edges. So you want to serge both sides, and then you also want to serge the back portion with the zipper opening and whatnot. And then what we're going to do is we are actually going to trim down our darts. And this is totally okay because this fabric is extremely bulky. And then what we are going to do is we're going to serge this edge right here because it is going to be a raw edge at that point. And you can even do this with pinking shears, but I decided to do it on my serger. You're going to take both skirt back pieces, and I made a little dot marking about halfway through on that skirt piece, and this is to indicate where I want to start my seam line, and the opening will actually be the zipper part. So I'm going to use some wonder clips, and I'm going to pin just down that lower edge there, and then I'm going to take this to my machine, and we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And we will be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance for the entire project. So go ahead and press that seam open, and you can use a clapper or even like a really heavy book to kind of make sure that that seam stays open. And then what we are going to do is we are going to attach our skirt front at the side seams there, and once again pinning or clipping as you like, and we will be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Do this for both sides. A pro tip about sewing with this type of fabric, I actually am not using the normal 2.5 stitch length. I'm actually using between a 3 and a 3.5 stitch length because it is just so thick, and it's working really well here. So I encourage you to do the same on your machine. So now we're going to get into the facing. You're going to take your original pattern piece and you're actually going to make a dart like how you would do on the garment. And we are actually going to make a little crease. Make sure you grab some Scotch tape and tape this down. And you would have created the same dart that you pretty much have in your skirt. And we're going to do this for the front piece and the back piece. Now, because paper is harder to manipulate than fabric, you're going to have a little bit of a crease or a wrinkle. So I do encourage you to grab some pattern weights to kind of hold this down. And you're going to take a scratch sheet of paper and you are literally going to trace the top edge of your waist on the skirt. And then what I like to do is I like to make a little marking for my edge on both sides. And then I usually take my see-through ruler and mark about 2 inches down, and then that is your typical facing amount, and you just kind of go from there. Your front facing will be on the fold, and then your back facing pieces you'll want to cut 2 of. So I actually used part of the pillowcase for the facing. That way everything could match, but I went ahead and I interfaced all of this, serged the raw edges, and now I'm going to pin and sew on both of the slanted sides here. Once you are done with that, go ahead and press those seams open and line them up with your skirt pieces. And you're going to pin this all the way around, and we'll take this to the sewing machine and sew it at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you have taken this to the sewing machine, go ahead and trim those edges if you feel like they're a little bulky, and then do a top stitch, and of course do a good pressing, and you're going to press those seams upward. All right, so now go ahead and attach your invisible zipper. We are going to make sure that the teeth bump up right to the edge of that quilted top and that it doesn't go over into the facing, because that would be catastrophe. And so I've already sewn down one side, and right now I'm using my Wonder clips to pin down the other side. As a reminder for the invisible zipper, you want to make sure that the teeth are facing outward. That way when you zip it up, the teeth will actually go into the garment. I don't see why you can't use an exposed normal polyester zipper here. I think I just chose an invisible zipper, but to each their own. Part of a successful invisible zipper installation is having an invisible zipper foot. It really goes a long way in making sure that you have something that you are proud of and just super simple to make at that point. Definitely highly recommend investing in one of these. Now that the zipper is installed, go ahead and fold down your facing on top of the zipper, making sure that the tab is out of the way and that you're not sewing down on any of the teeth in the zipper. And go ahead and take this to your machine and sew it up roughly at about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then if you want, you can stitch in the ditch on the facing here. That way it'll stay tucked into your skirt. One of the last steps is actually adding bias binding. This is the bias binding from the actual pillowcase. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reattach it for the bottom hem. This was always part of the plan here. So I am going to open the seam up, and then we are going to stitch it down using the same creases from the bias binding that we had in the original pillowcase. So the bias binding is basically a double fold bias binding, and so this is about a 1/4 inch seam allowance here that I'm doing. And of course I have widened my stitch length to about a 5.0 because there's going to be a lot of bulk in this area and I want to make sure I get it right. And so then you just kind of crease it down over onto itself. That way you kind of reinvent that wheel right there. And then you take it back to your machine and do the top stitch. Again, make sure that your stitch length is wide enough. That way you don't kind of jam up your machine or anything like that, because once again, this is very thick fabric, and you're all set. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. You can subscribe to my channel at Raven Maureen right here on YouTube, and you can follow me at Raven Maureen on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads. See you next time. Bye.